Hey everyone, thanks for coming out. We have with us today Lieutenant Kyle Gouch from the Harrisburg Bureau of Police and Captain Terry Wieland, also from the Harrisburg Bureau of Police. They are going to speak about not just the arrest made in the Sunken Gardens homicide from December 22nd, but also the high success rate of homicide clearances from 2022. This was the 18th homicide that was solved in 2022 of the 23, and Captain Whelan will be able to speak about that. Captain Ata Kakbo Martin will be here shortly. He is down the street at another event. He'll be here to speak about some of the technology that Harrisburg Police are going to be using throughout 2023 that we hope will cut down on some of these crimes before they even start. So we will start with Lieutenant Gouch, who will speak about what led to the arrest in the suspect from the Sunken Gardens homicide on December 22nd.
Good morning. So as most of you know, on Thursday, October 22nd, Harrisburg Police responded to the Sunken Gardens right up front and Verbeck in reference to a deceased female. The investigation obviously immediately kind of led us to believe it was a homicide or foul play. Pursuant to the autopsy that was conducted a few days later, it was confirmed that the cause and manner of death was homicide, that the victim was brutally assaulted and as a result of the assault, succumbed to her injuries and passed. We put a couple of things on Crime Watch to include a couple images and videos that were captured from local security camera footage. And thank you to you guys. You guys published those pretty quickly, and we immediately started getting tips in reference to who the person of interest was that we were looking for. At that point in time, we didn't know whether the person of interest was our actual actor, but we obviously had a gut feeling that was the route the case was going to go. The tips led us to an individual later identified as Brandon Martinez, and Mr. Martinez subsequently was arrested and charged with the murder of the victim from the Sunken Gardens homicide. He was charged and arrested on Friday and is awaiting, obviously, the judicial proceedings that will come from there. I can't underestimate, or sorry, I can't, what's the word I'm looking for there? Oh, no. No, I can't emphasize how much it was appreciated with all the tips and all the information that came in from the public. This was obviously a classic example of what happens when we get the information out there and when the community gets it and they take an active role in the investigation. It really, really did help us to focus in on the person of interest and get the person identified and ultimately get him in custody and charged with this horrific act. Obviously, the judicial proceedings will continue from here, and hopefully the family, I always say, hopefully this brings, if nothing else, the smallest sense, or at least a small sense of closure for the family that we do have the person in custody, and now it's just a waiting game for when they have their day in court. So with that, any questions? And understand, I can only answer questions probably just based on what's in the probable cause. I won't be able to speak on anything outside of the probable cause.
How that compares sometimes when you don't get the tips that you need for something like this.
Well, the tips led us down a path that ultimately got the result that we discussed on the arrests. But it was nice to see not just one or two. I mean, we had a pretty broad amount of tips, a pretty good solid number of tips that came in, and all of them were kind of pointing in the right direction as well, which obviously leads us to believe that we're on the right path as well. So it definitely helps. I've said before, like the Harrisburg Police, we're only as good and as valuable as the community kind of lets us and allows us to be. So the community in this case took an active role in the investigation, and it definitely helped to get us to the result that we have with the arrest and the charging of Mr. Martinez. There are cases that we don't get any tips, and it does make it a little more difficult for the detectives. It doesn't mean that we can't solve them. We're not going to solve them because we have, but it helps us to get a quick, not should say quick, but a faster and more efficient arrest done in the circumstances where we get a lot of community involvement, a lot of tips, and a lot of cooperation. Nothing else? I like it. All right.
Captain Terry Wieland is here. As we mentioned, this was of the 23 homicides in 2022. This was the 18th to have been solved. 78% clearance rate, according to 18 of the 23, 78%. Want to thank Penn Live for highlighting that in a recent article that they did. But the national average, according to the most recent FBI data in 2021, from going back to 2020, murders and non-negligent homicides, the most recent data showed the national average was 54.4%. So Harrisburg Police is solving homicides 24 percentage points above the national average. Captain Terry Wieland's team has done a remarkable job with these crimes and will be able to speak about what they are doing to solve these homicides.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Like Mr. Maisel said, I'm Terry Wieland. I'm in charge of the Criminal Investigation Division here at the Harrisburg City Bureau of Police. Like Matt said, we finished up 2022 with a 78% solvability rate, which is pretty phenomenal. A lot of people ask the question, how or why? Like, what are you guys doing that's so special? Lieutenant Gouch kind of hit on it. A lot of it is tips and things like that come in from the public. We can only do so much by way of collecting video and things like that. A lot of it's people sending in tips. We put the case up on Crime Watch and what information we can put out there and people respond to it. That goes a long way towards solvability. Some of it doesn't really apply to the case that we get. We get tips that are so excuse me, off the wall about some things, but we have to chase all that down and either put some credibility behind it or not. But fortunately, in the majority of cases that we had from 2022, we were able to put cases on people and get some pretty bad dudes off the street. Just going back, the 50-some percentile of solvability was from 2020. That we were here at the city about a 55 to 57, I think, 2 years ago. Granted, at that time we were knee deep in the pandemic and everything, and nobody really wanted to talk. I mean, that's all I could really put to it. I've been asked that question several times over the last 2 years. How are you able to do this? How are you not able to do that? And that's one of the big things. When people talk, good things happen by way of prosecution. I can also talk a little bit about the caliber of officers that we're putting on the street these days, being intimately involved with the hiring process. I know the men and women that are applying here and also get hired and going through the police academy and all that stuff. They're out there on the street. We do have a strong working relationship with our patrol division here, as well as the Dauphin County District Attorney's Office. There's a lot of cooperation, and we work like a well-oiled machine. And that, again, goes a long way towards successful prosecution. Any questions?
Can you talk a little bit about you kind of mentioned there just the importance of public and the community and the tips that they give, but the impact of technology, social media, being able to do things like Crime Watch, have those things shared on the internet. I have to assume that that's probably a big part of it.
It is absolutely. We could put something on Crime Watch, and there's people that they don't even have to be in the United States and they can see it. If they subscribe to our Crime Watch portal, and they can send us tips from Europe or somewhere like that. But World Wide Web means something. You can have it at the drop of just hit the go button on that, and our cases are put out there on Front Street basically, and the whole world can see it. The other thing that I'm not going to give up every corporate secret that we have, but it is no big secret that wherever you go in the civilized world, if you're around a built-up area, you're on some type of surveillance, as we are right now in this room that we're in. You're on some type of physical surveillance, whether it's somebody watching you or a camera. About 80% of where you go. That's just a number off the top of my head, but that pretty much rings true. And now we add Ring cameras into that mix, and the city has our own cameras and stuff that we have out there, license plate readers, all kinds of technology like that my colleague Captain Atah Cockbo Martin's going to talk about here in a couple of minutes. It all gets factored into the equation and again brings forth successful prosecution in a lot of cases.
And I guess the other side of it is also looking at that social media may also spread misinformation as well, though, too. Like you said, you have to, watch those bogus tips.
Right. We try to take that all into account, that some people post things based off of emotion, but, some people, they put things up on Facebook or any kind of social media, and we pay attention to that stuff. We have to. And again, it's used to either discount or put some kind of credibility behind information. Thank you.
Captain Wieland somewhat alluded to it a second ago, just talking about the technology that helps in solving these crimes, and we hope will also prevent some of these crimes from starting in 2023. We have a number. I think we put out a press release towards the end of the year that discussed some $3.3 million in grants from the PCCD that will help bring in some much-needed technology. Captain Cockbo Martin will be able to discuss some of the other things that are being done. His team kind of is the first crew on the scene when a crime happens, and he can discuss some of the technology that we hope to use in 2023 to cut down on crimes.
Good morning. My name is Captain Cockbo Martin. I'll spell it A-T-A-H, Cockbo Martin, A-K-A-K-P-O -Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N. Some of the technologies that the Uniform Patrol Division is working with and hopes to work with in the coming year are some advancements in the camera systems that we will be placing up over the city demographic, the area. Currently we have a couple of cameras right now, but we're looking to expand that program. And these cameras would, they're license plate readers. They would develop quicker intel for vehicles that we're looking for, which will help aid in the initial onset of investigations. So those would be beneficial, especially if we're looking for vehicles that are of interest for a lot of crimes that happen fresh. The Uniform Patrol Division would be able to go out and search for those vehicles in a timely manner versus waiting around for that intel to come in. Along with that, some of the grant information has been given us to initiate a shot spotter system, and that is to detect the gunshots in the neighborhoods. That information, again, will be relayed back for a quicker response in some of the neighborhoods where there are a lot of shootings. And that information as well gets to the uniformed patrol officers so that they can respond to certain areas in a quicker rate of fashion versus the phone call that comes in, then gets patched through with dispatch, and then that has an inherent delay in our response to getting to some of those calls. There are a lot of other technologies that we are bringing to the forefront. Some of the things are relatively new. We are looking to try to advance our camera system, our BWCs, our body-worn cameras that the officers have out there. We found that the implementation of those cameras worked out well, both for the officers and the citizens. And it continues to give us a great perspective about how things are going on the street. It's worked in several cases to help identify within our bureau about what things we could do better, especially in officers' response on the onset. When you get out to a situation and the scene is very chaotic, it kind of gives you that fresh perspective. But we've utilized that as well to kind of help with the public's communication with the law enforcement on that end so we can have a better communication with that. There are some others, and I'm sure Captain Whelan and Lieutenant Gouch talked about some of the systems that help us, Uniform Patrol, work better with the Detective Division, and the Cellbrite, which is one of the systems that we're moving forward with, and that's basically to capture the information on cell phones and keep the cell phones fresh so that we're not losing information. through a turn off or a shut off on the phone. Faraday bags with an outlet supply so that we are able to keep those phones plugged in up to about 3 days time while detectives apply for search warrants to gain valuable information that are inside those phones. And those are some of the other things that we're working on. So I will take any questions.
I know that in another city that I worked at where they used ShotSpot, they found it to be very consistent in terms of actually detecting guns.
Did you say inconsistent?
In terms of actually detecting gun specifically. Like a lot of false claims of gunfire in the system that turned out to not be found. Let's say. Can you speak to that? I mean, are there any concerns there?
Very much so. We had a similar system in the early on days. I would probably say 10 years ago when the technology first came out. It did give us a lot of false positives. You didn't get the accuracy that I think you thought you were getting in some of those, but you did get, I would say, probably with about a 40% actuality rate that those were gunfires being set off. We've been promised with some of the companies that we're working with now that the technology is advanced. It's more accurate. It picks out certain indications and pitch that are similar and relative to what the gunshot fire would sound. I don't think any system's perfect, but I think it's a much better product than what was being used 10 years ago. And also, it will, at least on the times that it is effective and is working, it will allow us the quick response into some of those areas. And then we can also use some of that for our crime stat statistics as well, where we're finding out where most of the shots fired calls are coming from and can kind of pinpoint our response and some proactive venues or measures for those types of area.
ShotSpotter is the vendor on that, the one that you're going to use.
I don't know it's a type of, yes, that is one of the vendors, but there's a bid process where that has to go through, and that's something else that we would have to look at. But yes, it is the same type of technology with the other vendors as well, but that is one of the main companies we're looking at.
Do you know how many ShotSpotter devices you'll have and whether those can be moved around?
Once they are placed up in areas, they're permanent. They're not, you can't place them around because they're hardwired in. Some of the systems are battery enabled, but I don't think that's one of the ones that we're looking at currently. We would put them in the areas where we are having a lot of issues, where we need to track down the severity of the gunfire in some of the neighborhoods that we're having them and kind of get a quicker response. So on the onset, what we would be planning is to put those in neighborhoods where we've had a recent amount of gunfire activity and hope that it would deter and as well as decrease some of the gunfire in that neighborhood with our quick response.
How many devices?
It would depend on the grant and how many we can purchase for that.
I can supply that information.
Sure.
Once I take a look.
Yeah.
There's always privacy concerns with stuff like license plate scanners and things like that. Where does the balance come in between using this technology, which obviously helps you make some arrests, serious people you want to arrest, at the same time dealing with the fact that license plate scanners, could be scanning everybody's plates. They're coming in to the city or whatever. How do you balance the privacy concerns?
I'm not sure what the balance of the privacy is on that. It does scan every plate that passes that, but that's no different than you going through the toll booths on the turnpike. It's what you do with the information, and that information is kept private. That's also under strict, it's not like anyone can log on to that system and obtain that information. It's usually for law enforcement purposes only and through our district attorney's office that authority gets given out to certain people for that information. And that, hopefully will help people understand that it's not that it's a fishing expedition to just go through data. We look for specific things when we're going into that system. And I'm sure there's they explained to us a very elaborate audit system about going through and what you're looking for and why you're looking for it and specifics that need to be answered when you're in the system.
Just a little bit more of an emotional question. I mean, of course, from a judicial standpoint, you guys want to solve every case and make sure that justice is homicides that the victims, their family, their friends, and the community get from everyone that's solved?
You're absolutely right, and I think a lot of contention is with a lot of victims who are left with unsolved answers. And there's situations where they can't benefit from closure because we haven't completely done our jobs in providing them with that closure. And so when we are able to use a lot of the technology and to face a situation where we can completely close a case and give the family and loved ones the most deservable peace that they can get, being a victim, it's gratifying. It's gratifying for the officers, it's gratifying for everyone involved, and then hopefully that extends to others. There's still a gap to bridge with law enforcement in the community. We do our best every day. The men and women that go out there and respond, they try to do their best. But there's always a small pool of people that find fault or mistrust, and that's because there's something maybe that in their period they felt the system may have let them down. And with our ability to help close some cases and provide those people with some closure, we hope to bridge the gap and make things better.
Are the license plate readers also permanent fixtures, or can they be moved around?
At this point, once we're setting them up, they will be permanent, yes.
Do you know where you'll be setting them up, or is that?
Currently, we have 4 set up throughout the city. There'll be discussions with the district attorney's office about where we would place the rest of them once the money from the grant comes through. They're all usually on main intersections, populated intersections that has frequent traffic. And I'm sure Matt can talk about where those locations. Anything else? Okay, thank you.